Hello everyone, I'm Christina, and we're going to talk about what we might be able to expect this summer. There's a lot of talk, big words, grand solar minimum, Dalton's minimum, grand solar maximum, and all of these charts. But what does it really all mean? What it all comes down to is what the solar rays were able to do with these volcanoes, and it's a domino effect. So that's why we're having this longer, harder winter, right? So, what are we going to expect as far as hurricane season, crop growth, things like that? Well, there's actually a lot of information to really go on. As far as hurricane season goes, I don't really see it as an issue at this time. I mean, we have pretty strong winds right now coming from the north, but the temperatures in the Gulf aren't really, looking anything like they did last year. The weather is nothing like it was last year, and the exceptionally warm temperatures in the Gulf, even during the winter, that year, different situation than this year. So I really don't see an issue with hurricanes this year, not really. But what we are seeing is the crop differences, not just crop losses, but there was a peach farmer that was saying pretty much what I was saying the other day. Their crops are okay, but they're growing slower. There's been some damage, some crop loss, but they're definitely growing slower. So are mine. So I'm glad it's not just me and my amateur growing skills. I really hope that my listeners are out there thinking about some kind of plant they can grow that is edible, they might like to eat. The temperatures in the Gulf right now are basically in the 70s, from like 70 to 79. And when it comes to earthquakes, yesterday was very, very quiet in America. And still today also. We've had 2 quakes of note, but not really in the United States. It's been in Iran and Japan the last couple of days, but otherwise it's like so few quakes anywhere that it's really not even worth talking about at this time. I'm sure something will pop up. Okay, but what I really wanted to talk to you about is that this year is following a pattern that is very close to the 1816 weather that we were having back then, and to look back at what history says about this period in time gives us a really good outlook. And when you listen to what Wikipedia says, and then you think about the headlines you've been seeing in the news and hearing about, then it really gives you cause for concern and a need to really prep and get something lined up for yourself and your family. So we're going to go ahead and just start reading. This is not just about the United States. This talks about different countries all over the world. So this should be interesting for pretty much everybody. So here we go. 1816 is known as the year without a summer, also the poverty year, and 1800 and froze to death, because of severe climate abnormalities that caused average global temps to decrease. This resulted in major food shortages across the northern hemisphere. Evidence suggests that the anomaly was predominantly a volcanic winter event caused by the massive 1815 eruption of Mount Tambora in the Dutch East Indies, and perhaps exacerbated by the 1814 eruption of the Mayan in the Philippines. Now, how many volcanic eruptions have we been having going off for months now, including right now? Lots, right? Way too many. Known today as the Little Ice Age, it had already caused considerable agricultural distress in Europe. So heads up, Europe. The Little Ice Age's existing cooling was exacerbated by the eruption of Tambora, which occurred near the end of the Little Ice Age. The year without a summer was an agricultural disaster. Historian John D. Post has called this the last great subsistence crisis in the Western world. The climatic aberrations of 1816 had the greatest effect on most of New England, Atlantic Canada, and parts of Western Europe, North America. In the spring and summer of 1816, a persistent dry fog was observed in parts of the eastern United States. The fog reddened and dimmed with the sunlight, such that sunspots were visible to the naked eye. Neither wind nor rainfall dispersed the fog. It has been characterized as a stratospheric sulfate aerosol veil. The weather was not in itself a hardship for those accustomed to long winters. The real problem lay in the winter's effect on crops and thus on the supply of food and firewood. At higher elevations where farming was problematic in good years, the cooler climate did not quite support agriculture. In May 1816, frost killed off, this is May they're talking about of that year, frost killed off most crops in the higher elevations of Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Vermont, as well as upstate New York. On June 6th, snow fell in Albany, New York, and Dennisville, Maine. In Cape May, New Jersey, frost was reported 5 nights in a row in late June, causing extensive crop damage. Many commented on the phenomenon. Sarah Snell Bryant of Cummington, Massachusetts, wrote in her diary, "Weather backward. At the Church family of Shakers near New Lebanon, New York, Nicholas Bennett wrote in May 1816, all was froze, and the hills were barren like winter. Temperatures went below freezing almost every day in May. The ground froze on June 9th. On June 12th, the Shakers had to replant crops destroyed by the cold. On July 7th, it was so cold everything had stopped growing. And right now, mine is slowed big time. The Berkshire Hills had frost again on August 23rd, as did much of the upper Northeast. As a Massachusetts historian summed up the disaster, severe frost occurred every month. June 7th and 8th, snow fell, and it was so cold the crops were cut down, even freezing the roots. In the early autumn, when corn was in the milk, it was so thoroughly frozen that it never ripened and was scarcely worth harvesting. Breadstuffs were scarce and prices high, and the poor class of people were often in straits for want of food. It must be remembered that the granaries of the Great West had not then been opened to us by railroad communication, and people were obliged to rely on their own resources and upon others in their immediate locality. But that is what we're probably facing at some point, because what the signs are showing us is that we're not going to be able to keep relying on these big corporations. We're going to have to start going back more and more to local farmers and being more self-preserving and be able to trade some of those vegetables or goods, because if the economy does happen to collapse, that's what we're going to have to use. You might have tomatoes growing and they're doing great, but you're out of soap or you need something else, and you can trade those things, right? Okay, so reading on. In July and August, lake and river ice was observed as far south as northwestern Pennsylvania. Frost was reported as far south as Virginia on August 20th and 21st. Rapid, dramatic temperature swings were common, with temperatures sometimes reverting from normal or above normal summer temperatures as high as 95 degrees to near freezing within hours. Thomas Jefferson, retired from the presidency and farming at Monticello, sustained crop failures that sent him further into debt. And in this Monticello, I'm wondering if this is the same No, this is on the East Coast. I was thinking, that town in California that had that landslide, but it's not. Okay, so Europe and Asia, it has a couple of comments. Cool temperatures for Europe and heavy rains resulted in failed harvests in Britain and Ireland. Families in Wales traveled long distances begging for food. Famine was prevalent in North and Southwest Ireland following the failure of wheat, oat, and potato harvests. In Germany, the crisis was severe. Food prices rose sharply, with the cause of the problems unknown. People demonstrated in front of grain markets and bakeries, and later riots, arson, and looting took place in many European cities. It was the worst famine of the 19th century Europe. The effects were widespread and lasted beyond the winter. In western Switzerland, the summers of 1816 and 1817 were so cool that an ice dam formed below a tongue of the, I might not say this right, Jethro Glacier, high in the Val de Bains. Despite engineers Venet's efforts to drain the growing lake, the ice dam collapsed catastrophically in June of 1818. That sounds scary. In China, this is the Asia area they're talking about now, the cold weather killed trees, rice crops, and even water buffalo, especially in the north. Floods destroyed many remaining crops. The monsoon season was disrupted, resulting in overwhelming floods in the Yangtze Valley. In India, the delayed summer monsoon caused late torrential rains that aggravated the spread of cholera from a region near the Ganges in Bengal to as far as Moscow. In Japan, still exercising caution after the cold weather-related Great Tame Famine of 1782 to 1788. Okay, yeah, so what they're saying is in Japan, they had had a famine before that, not long before, and they were still being very careful. But no crop failures were reported, and there were adverse effects on the population. So the effects, cultural effects, and pop culture, I mean, it talks about times of war and rioting, and disease. So you're really going to have to start taking measures to understand how to get your water right. If it's too acidic, you can use limestone. Charcoal helps clean out impurities. You can get that at fish stores. Sometimes the sun in some clear 2-liter bottles for a few hours, that'll kill some germs. But you're gonna have, if you have to use water that's that isn't completely right, you really need to learn to do something with the water that you have so that you can. And so when it comes to the summer, I'm not really gonna be that worried about hurricanes this year. I'm really more worried about, can you feed yourself? Do you know where your local farms are? And up in the north, I mean, you're gonna have to really get creative and at least learn. I mean, this is my second year ever gardening because before I got amnesia, my old self couldn't grow anything. I mean, anything. So this is a new gift I have. I can garden now. And so last year was a really big learning thing. And so keeping them in the pots where I can move them, where if they need more sun, less sun, protect them from hail, freezing weather, that's really helped. But in the northern areas, you're going to have to get creative. You're going to have to think indoor growing, get some books, go online, do something. But I have a feeling that when this all hits the grocery stores, it's going to be almost sudden. It's going to be a panic kind of thing. And it's not going to get any better. And do you have any idea how long it takes to grow some of these things? So don't think you can just wait till it all happens and then walk outside and plant a plant. And it's, overnight going to be giving you beautiful tomatoes. It doesn't work like that. Okay. So anyway, I just wanted to give y'all a heads up. we're doing okay. We're getting ready for the storm. It won't be here for me until Saturday. And so I'll have a pretty good Sabbath, just kicking back, listening to the rain. And otherwise, I've just really been, you can feel the wind. It's a very forceful, cool wind coming in ahead of the storm. Trees just swaying. But okay, I'm going to let y'all go. Been on here long enough, and I don't want to take up your whole day. I hope everything is great for you guys, and I will talk to you soon. All right, bye.